Hi, and welcome to episode of CineNation. My name is Brandon Sparks.
And I'm Thomas Horton.
And here at CineNation, we love delving into genre and examining genre, the tropes and the history. And for the month of July, we are going to be discussing and delving into the genre of coming-of-age movies. It felt very topical for the summer. That's when a lot of these stories take place. Last episode, we kind of broke down the genre and the tropes of it. And so, Thomas, what are some tropes and kind of the story types that occur in the coming-of-age genre?
Yeah, we talked about kind of clashing with your parents for sure, especially in earlier stuff like Rebel Without a Cause. Something we brought up is either the parents either factor into it really heavily or not at all, or you see this kind of some of them are just kind of presented as these teen utopias where they don't have parents. Yeah, and then you see a lot of you see kind of romance, how important teenage romance really feels to everyone. Then you have and very kind of similar to what we talked about in our Texas movies, you kind of have these feelings of being trapped in your hometown, whether you're going to leave or not, especially in American Graffiti. We had the two characters one was excited to go off to college and the other one wasn't ready to leave home yet. And by the next morning they had swapped completely. So you do get some of those very similar to the Texas feeling we got. I can't wait to get out of here. I'm stuck here in this town. I'm too big for this town. Everything like that.
It's good that you bring up the Texas genre because today's movie, Splendor in the Grass, feels very like a Texas movie, but it's not set in Texas. Mm-hmm. It's set in Kansas. So we're discussing the 1961 film Splendor in the Grass today. It's currently streaming on HBO Max and probably available to rent on Amazon or wherever you get your movies. So just so you know, we're going to be spoiling this movie a little bit probably when we're talking about kind of scenes and all of that. I've seen Splendor in the Grass twice before this rewatch, and I watched it recently a few months ago, but it was interesting to watch it now and kind of the tropes that we're talking about. And so Splendor in the Grass was directed by Elia Kazan and written by William Inge, who wrote Picnic, the play, and they wanted to make a movie together because they worked on a play before this, and that's kind of how Splendor in the Grass came to be at Warner Brothers. The cast is Natalie Wood, and I'll talk about more of how this movie is important in her career. And then it stars Warren Beatty in his first screen appearance. He actually only done one play before this and a few TV appearances, and this feels like a big role to do out of the gate with your first film.
Yeah, especially up against Natalie Wood, who's probably the biggest teen star of the time.
Exactly. So, Thomas, you'd never seen this film before.
I'm not.
What are your initial thoughts on this film?
It's extremely melodramatic, and I don't like to use
very much so.
I don't like to use melodramatic as a negative term. I think it's used too often because movies are melodramatic, kind of by definition. Plays or drama is melodramatic. That's the whole point. But it Kazan specifically is we talked about this a little bit last week when we were talking about Rebel Without a Cause and kind of the stamp that he left on James Dean. Kazan is all about unbridled emotion, boom, just let it all go. And this movie just kind of is like a roller coaster ride. You hit these points and it's this is insane, and then it kind of drops down. The pacing and the tone was just kind of felt all over the place for me. It hit some just these insanely crazy huge dramatic moments, and then it would just be the next scene is 2 years later and everybody's oh yeah, that was crazy.
It definitely speeds up at the very end of the movie. Mm-hmm. It jumps from
I had to pause it. Someone was calling me. I had to pause it, and when I looked back, I was I only have half an hour left on this movie. How? What? There's. But yeah, it was funny that we were talking that you brought up that I brought up Texas movies, because it struck me as if Last Picture Show was not this neo-realist piece, the yes. Very dry realistic piece that it is, this is the flip side of Last Picture Show, and it's with Kazan specifically just let it all go crazy, yell, scream, boom.
It's the real I don't know if I consider this era golden age of Hollywood at this point, because I think it's dying off, but it's very much like the old traditional Hollywood style, doing the same similar like Last Picture Show story in a way. And I know
but also
I
like
clocked that in watching
it felt smack dab in the middle of like switching over from like very obvious. It was what 61. It's like very obviously switching from the 50s to the 60s, and that when you first start watching, you're like, oh, there's Natalie Wood. Like I know her from these 50s movies, and then it's just immediately like overtly sexual. And you're like, oh, were they allowed to do this? Like it's right in that time when they were really kind of like shrugging off the Hays Code, and you're just kind of like, wow, that is almost a full nude scene. Like, it's very, very artfully shot, but you're like, damn, we're in a new era for sure.
Very much so. So we showed this at one of our screenings here at Sideshow Books in LA and back in February, and this, I won't say this was it wasn't the best received movie. It was a well-received movie, and a lot of people loved it. They're like, I didn't know they could do this stuff before like 67, 68, when like the new Hollywood came in. Mm-hmm. And so we had this kind of long discussion about how films were pushing the boundaries long before Bonnie and Clyde came out. Mm-hmm. A lot of people assume like Bonnie and Clyde and The Graduate, and that's when everything changed. But when you're looking at movies like Splendor in the Grass, they're definitely pushing sex and kind of these taboos in terms of what's talked about on film and shown on film.
It's not the subtext that you're used to from the 50s. It is forefront. It is all at the forefront. I don't think anybody says sex. Like, there's coded words, but it is not anywhere near as coded as you would be used to watching the like Golden Age Hays Code kind of stuff. It is on the forefront.
I don't know of many movies that deal with sexual repression the way Splendor in the Grass does.
I think one of my favorite scenes, and not I'll save like real favorite scenes for later, but this is really speaks to, it felt very realistic, but also I don't think the guy was a great actor. But the scene,
the doctor scene,
Warren Beatty's like, doctor, I'm going out with Natalie Wood, and when I come home, I'm just not satisfied. And he's like, oh. And then he's like, and my dad says I should maybe start going out with another girl that might satisfy me. And the doctor's like, oh, I don't know about that. And
he goes, oh, no. It's so... I clocked that too. I was like, man, the awkwardness of this scene. But like that scene
I don't know what note. I wonder what note Kazan gave that guy headed into that scene, because it's not just, it doesn't feel like he's acting uncomfortable. It feels like the actual actor is uncomfortable to be in that scene.
It sums up this conversation of, I guess, the changing norms of like the generations in some way. Is that generation with the doctor and the parents are very like, they don't talk about sex. Sex is not a thing you do till marriage. And even and the mother and Deanie, who is played by Natalie Wood, Deanie's mother is very much sees sex like a business transaction, where it's like, oh, women don't like that, like. And I only do it because your father like wants to do it. Like it's the men that enjoy the act. Women don't enjoy sex.
Well, and I didn't clock if you said it earlier, but just to make everyone clear on this, it was shot in 60. I mean, it was released in 61, but it's set in 29, right? It's
1928 to like 1932 is when it takes place.
So it really is like even more so than you think of like, oh, it's in the 50s and everything's repressed. It's like really set in a time when like, but also you had kind of the Roaring Twenties. I think what it touches on a lot is this idea of like the Roaring Twenties just kind of very like barely peeking in on this little city in Kansas, this little town in Kansas. Like Warren Beatty's older sister is a flapper, like would identify as a flapper, but she's like the only person in town who is really in on what kind of the Roaring Twenties is. But that idea of like the culture of the Roaring Twenties has kind of started to bring more openness about sex to this town.
And because the sister is coming from Chicago, because she dropped out of art school and like was married some guy, and her father, played by Pat Hinkle, like is like, no, we gotta get that annulled. So basically, I only gave the brief plot of Splendor in the Grass, but Splendor in the Grass, as Thomas said, it takes place in 1928, 1932. Mm-hmm. It is essentially about this young high school couple. Wilma Dean also goes by Deanie, who's played by Natalie Wood. and then Bud Stamper, who's played by Warren Beatty. The whole movie is kind of exploring these themes of a high school relationship and the sexual norms, and kind of just like I think specifically Natalie Wood's character is how a woman should be. Because Natalie Wood plays like three different versions of like what people like, an image of a woman. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like she's playing like, starts off as a nice girl, then it's like, oh, they didn't accept me as a nice girl, let me be a bad girl. Then that drives her basically insane. And then it's like at the end, it's this more mature, refined woman. And you've seen this kind of transition throughout the entire movie. She has the biggest like change throughout.
Oh yeah,
compared to Bud. So, brief history of how this film got made. It was like I say, and Ainge had done a play together. Like I said, Ainge wanted to do a movie. He had written a play actually in 1953 called Glory in the Flower, which is from the line that is used in this movie that gets the name Splendor in the Grass. And it's from the same William Wordsworth poem. And it's about two middle-aged former lovers who meet after a long estrangement. So very similar, and they're not middle-aged at the end of the movie, but very similar to this kind of ending of this film. And the character names, the male's character name was Bus. Not Bud, and the female character was Jackie. That's how they got involved. It was produced by Warner Brothers. Natalie Wood, I really want to talk about this movie just because I really love Natalie Wood as an actress, especially during this point. And Splendor in the Grass is probably the most important film in her career. And I think she's also very important in the genre of coming of age, because I think she's one of those rare people, and especially one of the first, I think maybe outside Elizabeth Taylor at this point in Hollywood, where you literally saw her transition from child star to teen star to woman through the films. And Splendor in the Grass is kind of that representation of that, where you're seeing that entire transition. So she made Rebel Without a Cause in 1955 and The Searchers in 1956 with John Wayne. It was a small part, but it was crucial. After that, she had like a slew of flops, like didn't make anything that was financially successful or quickly successful. She was upset with Warner Brothers and all the parts they were giving her. She thought they were terrible, so she wanted to kind of control the parts she took. So she refused anything they gave her, which resulted in Warner Brothers suspending her without pay for almost 7 months. So she doesn't make a film in 1959 at all. She arranged this new contract that allowed her to choose one movie a year, and it could be for any studio. And she kind of came back for Warner Brothers. One of the reasons why, because she found out about Splendor in the Grass. And she wanted to do this film because she knew she was at a point in her career, if she didn't have a hit, and if she didn't showcase that she could actually be like a adult actress, she didn't have a career. Because she started off doing child acting roles in like Miracle on 34th Street, and then transitioned to teen stuff with Rebel Without a Cause. And she really wanted to do this movie because it actually related to her life. Her mother was a very overbearing woman who controlled her relationships. There was one specific relationship Natalie would have when she was 15 of this young boy who like worked at a dairy farm with his father, and they became engaged. And Natalie Wood's mom was just like, you can't marry that boy. He's going to hurt your career. Like, you want to be an actress. Forces Natalie Wood to break off the engagement. The guy ends up like trying to commit suicide because of how how insane it goes. She won't talk to him because the mother gets involved. Ends up going to a mental hospital, which is basically, it's pretty much the story that's in this movie, except kind of the roles are reversed. And that was why when Natalie Wood took this role, she realized that it was going to open up old wounds with this relationship, which was something she never talked about to anyone. And she really wanted to work with Kazan because when she was before Rebel Without a Cause, she saw A Streetcar Named Desire and was like, that's the type of movies I want to make. So when she found that Kazan was directing this film that had this role that was very much her life, she was like, I have to work with them because he's like this movie god to her. So that's how she gets involved. Beatty, like I said, had never done a film before. He was cast in this film because he had started a failed Broadway play with Ainge, and then he made a few TV appearances, but that was it. And that's how this film kind of came together at the beginning of the 1960s. Also, too, and this might be jumping ahead a little bit, but in terms of like the big transition for Wood, this is the same year she also did West Side Story.
Oh, okay.
So this is happening at the same exact time.
Yeah, big year.
So that's the history. So Thomas.
Yes, sir.
What were your favorite scenes in this movie? I don't know if you said directly that you liked this movie. I'm not entirely sure if you said that or not.
I'm still a little mixed.
Okay.
And we can go into it a little bit more, but you know, Kazan is a beast of his own, and I don't know that I don't know that his style always pays off, but we can come back to that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of wild. His energy is so manic, in all of his stuff. But I think here, especially him specifically doing like teenagers, it is on like full display. And so there are some parts that was just like, wow, this is like overwhelming. That being said, I think probably one of my favorite scenes is the ending.
Yep.
Because not that I'm like, oh man, I was happy when it was over. But like you finally get to see both of them being very resigned, and a lot goes unsaid in that scene. So in the final scene, Deanie, Natalie Wood's character, has come out of a mental hospital, has been there for 2 years, I think they said.
Yeah.
And is now engaged to a patient who she met there, who she formed a very deep bond with, and he's a successful doctor, and she's gone back home, and Bud, whose family was rich, was part of the reason he wasn't allowed to marry her, was because he was rich, she was poor, has now lost everything in the Depression and is living on a cattle farm. And she goes to visit him, and she's, you know, extremely well dressed, and he's all dirty from working in the field. And she meets his son, and she meets his wife, and there's all that. It's very quiet. It's played very quietly with just like shots of him looking at her and her playing with his son. And there's all this unsaid about like, this could have been us. Like, look how far you've come. Like, Bud almost destroyed her as a person, and she's come out stronger than him now. And it's all left unsaid, which is kind of rare for this movie. Yeah. But I think it's just incredibly well handled. I really liked all the stuff in the mental hospital with her too. Yeah. Here's the thing, and you were talking about she was really excited to work with Kazan. I don't know, so many people that Kazan worked with were people that he made. You know, Kazan is almost most often recognized as from his contributions to acting as much as like to filmmaking. And a lot of the actors that we think of as Kazan actors are ones that like he got and molded completely. Yeah. And she's not a Kazan actor. And I don't know that they line up completely in this movie. I don't know that their styles line up. And so I think what I really enjoyed the most was like getting to see her towards the end, kind of playing everything a little bit more resigned, which was more out of his style.
Yeah, I think with this movie with her, I do love this movie. But this is one when I think when we played, I was very much like, when we played it at Sideshow, I was like, the first half, I'm like, I wonder if people are getting what's happening, or if can deal with what's happening, because it is very melodramatic. And her character, I don't think really starts working. And you might disagree with this scene, but it's the bathroom scene when she goes off on her mom. It's when the movie literally just shifts, and her character shifts, and you start to see more of a mature Natalie Wood. But I'll come back to that later. But yeah, the ending scene I think is the best scene in the film because of all the reasons you're saying. Because also it's the one where like it feels like the most relatable scene, because you're seeing two former, I don't say lovers, but two former people who loved each other. I guess two former lovers who are meeting and seeing, as you're saying, what their life could have been like together. Like Natalie Wood, she is at this point too. Deanie is like engaged to be married and getting married like within a month. And there's something about when she shows up, she's expecting him to be single, and she's willing to leave this fiance of hers to be with him. That's what it feels like when she finds out he's married. It's like, oh, this is not going to happen now. And I thought like she had built something up in her head. Like, do you think she was going there expecting to be with him?
I don't know. I'm not sure what she was expecting, because it's kind of weird. Like her mom is like, hey, you should go see him. He's like poor now, and then she goes.
Her mom doesn't want her to see him.
I thought, I felt like I got the impression like when they were alone together in the room, her mom was like, "Oh, you should go check on him," and then she went down and told the friends like, "Oh, don't let her near him." Okay, well, maybe I read that wrong, because I was like, "This mom is weird, man."
No, because she says like, "Oh, like he's poor now. I don't know where he moved to. I don't know where he is. I think he might move to Tulsa with his mother." Mm. So it's like she's very much lying to her about where he is, because she doesn't want her to go see him.
Yeah. I don't know. I think she's still very conflicted. Like when she shows up there.
Yeah.
But I mean, she knows she's heard that it's not going to be this like mansion and everything that she expected, and we can see that she's now like, there's that moment when her mom's like, "How much did this dress cost?" We're like, oh, she is like as like above your raisins, as we call it down here. Yeah, and I'm not sure what she intended on going in there, but I think that's what I kind of really love about that scene is seeing her kind of handle the shock of it all, as she's kind of taking it in.
Well, it's weird because like you see her revert back to a younger self in that scene at the beginning, because you have this moment when Beatty walks up and sees her, and she like runs towards him, like she's so excited to see him, and he doesn't reciprocate that. He stands still, even though I think he's like he's happy to see her. She's still in that mindset maybe that there's something between them, and he knows that like he's married and has a kid and there's nothing there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. It's like it's this when she goes in, like sees the baby and meets the wife, and there's also interesting moments with the wife, because the wife is like sees her as she's very fancy in her dress, but the wife is like working class, like making bologna. It looks like something on the fryer. Mm-hmm. Like just, and she's like kind of like, and she even like looks down at her dress once Deanie leaves, where it's just like, oh God, this guy might leave me for her. Because it's very much like she is like worried this her husband's ex-lover has come back into his life, and this might be it for them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, and speaking of that was another scene I really liked, was the two of them meeting. Beatty meeting the woman that would become his wife. He's almost failed out of Yale, and he's really missing being home. And he's drunk at this Italian restaurant and meets the waitress there, and they have this like clash, like culture clash talk where she's like, "Hey, let me make you a pizza," and he's like, "What's a pizza?" And she's like, "Where are you from?" But I thought she was really good in both scenes.
She was,
and that was, they had a really kind of nice connection between the two of them, I thought. I really like Beatty in this too. And I think it's very obvious from the rest of his career that Kazan didn't really have the like impact on him that he had on some of his other like young male actors.
Well, Beatty said, I think he had a impact on Beatty, but not in an acting form. I think because Beatty would say he had a huge impact on his directing and producing. Yeah, was that when he was, because you're looking at 61, and then Bonnie and Clyde is like 67, I think is what it is. So you're looking at a guy who is learning what Kazan is doing with this type of material in this kind of Midwestern setting, which is kind of what Bonnie and Clyde ends up becoming, where it's pushing more boundaries like this film is. So I think he's learning from Kazan, but not in the acting form, and more of like where to put the camera and the directing style. Mm-hmm. But no, Beatty, for the dude's first film, Beatty is really good in this movie.
Yeah, you really get the feeling, you really feel how conflicted he is. Yeah, he's so flighty in this movie, and it would be easy to just be like, oh man, that guy's he's a teenager, he just doesn't know what he wants. But he does give you the feeling that he's being just kind of pulled back and forth by his dad, and by what his family wants from him, and seeing the way that his sister's life has turned out by her being, quote unquote loose, and what that's led for her, and he really does love Deanie, but his dad's like, nope, no, that's not gonna happen, man. And I really liked him too in the scene when Deanie's in the hospital and he's trying to get into the room to see her, even though it was a little, that was the point where it was like she's in the bed and she's like tossing side to side and she's like, oh, Bud.
Oh yeah, when she's like, I hear someone's here.
Yeah, that's the point when I'm like, oh man, someone other than Kazan would have been like, let's take that back a little bit. And he's like, no, go for it, thrash in the bed a little bit harder. I thought Beatty was great in that scene, and the mom is like, I never want to see you again, and he's like, I still love her, I want to get married, I don't care what anybody says. He was really good in this, I think.
Yeah, I agree. The scene I want to bring up, is the bathroom scene when Natalie Wood's in the tub and like freaks out with her mother. I love this scene because I think it's the first moment where Wood just kind of goes unhinged in the movie, and you might not like it. Something about where it feels like she's just like the relationship between her mother and her has come to a head. And this is the moment where it happens, because I think it's right after this where she freaks out in the bathtub and starts yelling at her mother like, no, I'm still the nice girl that you always wanted me to be. No one's touched me, and goes off. And then I think the next thing is when she cuts her hair. Mm. And so it's the beginning of the transition of, I guess, I won't say from child to... This is the transitional moment when like she's going from the nice girl to the bad girl. Yeah. Where she's becoming, She
takes on this like, I'm going to be the exact, I've been trying so hard to be this type of person. I'm going to be the exact opposite now. And it doesn't end up working out for her, and it cracks her even further, I think. But you have this point, and I think it plays into a lot of like her watching Bud's older sister. You know, she's the one that everyone in town sees, and she's trying to emulate that too. But yeah, I mean, a lot of energy from here into Last Picture Show, like we talked about. You know, all these like the parents coming in and not knowing how much they're messing up their kids with their advice. Both her mom and Bud's dad just being like, hey, here's how I did it as a teenager, so it should work for you too. Yeah. And it's just like, no, you don't want your kids to turn into you. Like,
I feel like I don't know if Oscar clips were played when the Oscars were happening in 1961, but that feels like the clip they play of Natalie Wood in the bathtub.
I don't know, man. That's pretty risque, dude. That's the one I'm talking about. They're doing... Kazan is doing some very creative framing and blocking to not show Natalie Wood fully nude in that scene.
Yeah, you see a lot of just like bare back, and I think they actually cut, because it cuts from her running out of the bathroom, and then she's like laying on the bed, and you see like, you don't really see anything, but it's definitely implied because you see her like bare legs, that she's like naked on the bed.
Yeah, that was the moment. I mean, throughout the movie, there's all this like getting into cars and necking and everything, and I was like, what year is this made? Could they do this? And then that scene happened, and I was like, damn, this is a new era. This is we're out of the Hays Code.
I think Wood is great in that scene, and it just depends on if you, again, as you said, it's very melodramatic. This is the weird part of watching a film from 61 in present day, is that our sensibilities aren't the same as they were back then. So to us, it might seem very over the top, but at that point in time when it came out, it was seen in a very different light. Maybe it was like very acting, if that's the way to kind of describe it. But it was very, like you're saying, it's a very transitional moment, and this is a film that isn't really talked about in terms of the transition of content and Hollywood at this point.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's tough when you watch older movies because you're like, oh, this was very progressive for its time, but still, it's like you watch this and she's trying to kill herself and it just keeps like repeating Bud's name over and over again, and you're like, oh, come on. Like people back then might have been like, wow, she was driven so crazy by the fact that he wouldn't sleep with her that she's gonna kill herself. And it's just like, I don't know about, let's give her a little bit more credit than that. But
no, I agree. But
I mean, it works in the context. It's just a little bit much.
Well, this is the thing. It's you're seeing movies that were, I think, especially with Kazan directing, that feel very influenced by like the works of Tennessee Williams at this point. Because like, a lot of studios were making like Williams-esque movies because Streetcar Named Desire was such a huge hit. And I feel like Splendor in the Grass is coming at the tail end of that, like, I won't say movement, but tail end of that trend. And so I do feel like that's kind of that kind of culture and style is infused in this film. And moving on from the bathroom scene, a few other scenes I wanted to say. I really love the scene when she reads the Wordsworth poem, when she reads the Odes on Imitation of Immortality by William Wordsworth. And that's like, I think you're seeing her breakdown because she's starting the beginning of the breakdown because she's found out that Bud is now seeing this, is like the flapper character in the school, like the one who's the young teenager who's like more in tune with she's the one that everybody
on the football team dates her. Like she's
exactly because she's the one that sleeps around basically.
She's a sure thing, I think is the term that they used to use.
Yes, that's the term that they used to use. And so Deanie like is now like talking about this, reading this poem in class, and it's just kind of, you're seeing the cracks in the armor, I guess, with the character of Deanie in this moment. And I think Natalie Wood plays it incredibly well. Another scene I want to talk about, it's two scenes really. It's the New Year's Eve sequence when his sister, Jeannie, is drunk and is essentially being surrounded by all these men. It's a very dark scene because essentially
men who are also the age of her like father.
Her father, but it's essentially it's the beginning of a rape scene basically is what it is. And what Kazan does, and he brings it back up later, so that's why I want to talk about these two scenes as a pair, is he brings this like very, for a lack of a better word, seductive jazz music in the score. And it comes off as like a wolf creeping, or coming for its prey, basically, where these men are the wolves and the women are the prey. And it plays like, when you hear this sound, you know like bad stuff's about to happen.
Right.
So in that scene, you have his sister essentially is, she hits on one of the guys, she's drunk, and all these men kind of surround her. And it's like, hey, let's get out of here. And the guy's like, yeah, let's go. And he takes her to like a car, and all the men follow and watch, basically. And that's when Beatty comes in and gets into a fight with all the guys and breaks it up. And then that theme is repeated when Natalie Wood has turned into that type flapper character. And Toots, like Beatty's best friend in the movie, he's doing a similar thing where he's like, she's now like, she's vulnerable because she's had this blow up with Beatty, and he now puts her in the car, starts to kiss her, and then takes her to like the makeout spot. And that seductive jazz music comes back in, and you're now aware, oh, this is what's about to happen. Yeah. Because it's been cued earlier on with the previous scene.
And he proceeds to assault her.
He does, yeah.
And this is awful, but she keeps saying no, and then the only thing that stops him is she says no, Bud, and he's like, what, Bud? And it's like, screw you, dude.
But I guess because of that music cue, you are aware of what's about to happen.
Yeah, it feels kind of like Bernard Herrmann's score to Taxi Driver, in the way that it's like, if you take it completely away from what you're seeing, if you just listen to it away from the images, you're like, oh, this is some nice jazz. But then when you see it's meant to be like the seediness of the city and just how, you know, all the immorality of jazz in the city and all that kind of stuff coming in, and I'm sure that's what it represents here is the kind of Roaring Twenties coming in and infiltrating this city for good or for bad.
Another scene is the scene right before that, when she actually has the blow up with Bud, and she just kind of like essentially breaks down in front of him, of just like, why don't you want me? I'm being the person that you're going after now. Why won't you just like have me? I'm trying to give you what you want, and you won't even take me now. And so it's this it's hitting on this confusion that is present in a lot of teenagers of trying to please someone and being rejected, and you're like, so what do you want? Like, what can I give you to make you like love me? And that's, I think, what Danny is like going through in this moment. It is very melodramatic and very roller coastery, I guess you could say.
Yeah. I don't know. That was one of the scenes where I was just like, why can't Bud just tell her, hey, my parents won't let me be with you. That's it. Like, there's a couple of times it's kind of like that rom-com trope where you're like, if you guys would just talk to each other for a second, all of this would be solved.
Do you think that she would understand that though? I don't know. Like,
I don't know, but maybe it would have given her a little bit more peace of mind than thinking that he hates her when he doesn't.
On set life. So, what if I told you this wasn't shot in Kansas?
No way.
Where do you think it was shot?
Like 20 minutes outside of LA.
No, it was shot in New York State.
Okay.
They were supposed to shoot in Kansas, but there was a massive drought in the state. So they shot in New York State instead. Natalie Wood hated Warren Beatty on set, apparently. A lot of people thought Beatty was immature because he did whatever he wanted because he was this young kid. Wood soon asked if Beatty could not enter her dressing room because she could not stand him. Because they had it was a lower budget film than what Wood had worked on before. And so their makeup rooms were like together. Mm-hmm. And she was like, can you make sure he's not in the room when I'm in the room? Basically. She gave him the nickname Mental Anguish. And everyone on set used that when referring to him and then shortened it to MA. She would later respect his talent as they got more into the movie, but she was really worried that their love scenes would not play well at all because of how much she did not like him on set. And that will come back into play later on. There's this thing about Kazan that happens in this movie because Wood loved Kazan and wanted to work with him, and he's kind of considered this great actor or this great director who got a lot of great performances out of his actors. But he kind of wasn't the best in terms of safety. He was kind of a manipulator. So basically, Natalie Wood was deathly afraid of water. Was afraid of water her entire life. She didn't want to swim, and because her mother had this, a psychic told her mother when she was young that her second daughter will die of drowning mysteriously, which is what ends up happening in her life. So because of that, Wood was always afraid of water and said, hey, can we make sure, you have a stunt double for the scene when I jump into the water and try to commit suicide? And Kazan's like, yeah, we'll do that. Then get to the day, goes, hey, I hired a stunt double. She can't swim, so you have to do it now. Ugh. Which was a lie because the stunt double could swim. Because later the stunt double sued Kazan, and I think Natalie Wood, because Natalie Wood went on and said on talk shows that the stunt double couldn't swim, which hurt the stunt double's reputation. Aftermath and awards. So like I said, it was a big year for Natalie Wood. West Side Story was released the same year. Natalie Wood was nominated for Best Leading Actress in this film for Splendor in the Grass, and many assumed she would win, but it ended up going to Sophia Loren for the film Two Women. And this was the first time an actress won for a non-English speaking role.
Oh, wow.
William Ings would win the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay for this film. West Side Story was nominated for 11 Oscars and won 10. And Wood was, I said it was bittersweet because Wood was not nominated for West Side Story, but instead for this film. Don't know if she would have won for West Side Story or not. I'm not entirely sure. But I guess people thought because she was in both these films the same year, that's why she would possibly win the Oscar. Because it's kind of you did two great performances this year. You deserve this. And that didn't happen. After the filming, she was getting a divorce from Robert Wagner and started dating Warren Beatty for a bit. Because they met again on the press tour for Splendor in the Grass, and he was at the end of an engagement with Joan Collins, and she was getting divorced. They kind of just said, let's start seeing each other. What worked about this movie?
I think both the leads worked really well.
Yeah.
I think the two parents, the mom, Deanie's mom and Bud's father, were both both ended up well. At the beginning, I thought they were both a little kind of all over the place, but that is also just kind of the energy of the movie, and it got a little bit more focused towards the end. And both of them, I was very impressed by them. So I mean, once again with Kazan cast, I think cast overall is going to be the strength of it. The score, yeah, like you said, the score was really interesting and really well done to kind of have this jazz and a little bit more like, I was saying earlier, the score, the jazz kind of represents the Roaring Twenties, but it's important. It's not like 1920s big band jazz. It was much more contemporary kind of 60s. Jazz, like a smaller quartet kind of thing. There's some things that worked for sure. Oh wow! I think the setting was well done for being New York. I believed it was Kansas.
I love that you're just like I like that.
Yeah, the cast was good. Cast was really good.
How do you feel about the sister Ginny or Jeannie?
Yeah, she was great. I was sorry to see her kind of disappear from the movie like a third of the way through. But yeah, I liked her. I liked her kind of facing off with the dad in a couple. They had some really good scenes.
Yeah. And the other thing too, you're talking about when Natalie Wood's character Deanie transitions to like that character, she ends up singing the same song that Ginny is singing a lot of the times she's with other men, like Whatever Happened to Mabel or whatever. Mm-hmm. And Natalie Wood, when she's cut her hair and doing makeup, she's singing the same exact song. That was Kazan's wife, Barbara Loden.
Yeah.
She didn't do a lot of movies apparently. She did do a film called Wanda that she directed, and people considered her the female John Cassavetes because it was like an indie film that she had made. Okay, here's the big question for you, Tom. What didn't work about this movie?
Little problematic in its treatment of the female characters, I think. Yeah, I don't know. I think more so because it's something that I talked about with my girlfriend a lot when we watched Last Picture Show, like whether or not the depiction of JC is problematic. Is she depicted as a villain? I don't think she's depicted as a villain. I think she's shown as like a child who has been led astray by adults. This one just I'm still not sure. I'm still sorting through my feelings of the way women are treated in this movie, and I know we're not supposed to be on board with the way women are treated in this movie, but I do think we're supposed to give it a little bit more leeway than I'm comfortable with. And I mean, I know we're judging a different time and everything, but that was just kind of I came away feeling a little dirty watching this movie.
Are we talking about how like, because that's the big thing that kind of can irk certain people is that like the Deanie becomes so emotional because Bud is broken up there. She goes into a mental hospital.
Yeah.
Like on the surface, that sounds very like problematic.
I was rolling my eyes a little bit during that part, and that's kind of also has to do with, like I said, the way Kazan directs actors, where knowing Wood and knowing her talent, it felt outside of her range, and it felt like something she as an actress wouldn't normally choose to do the way that she played it sometimes. Mm-hmm. And yeah, but also just from like a story standpoint, like, oh, that guy dumped her and she tried to seduce him and he turned her down. So now she's literally insane. And everyone just being like, yep, that's what happens. And I mean, I was very happy to see in the end that she's the one who turns out being well adjusted and all of that.
Yeah.
But 2 years in a mental institution because this guy dumped you in high school just feels like a little
it's very problematic nowadays.
It feels like a little bit much.
But I'm not defending the era of the time, but it does feel very of its era of like, again, this is going with we've talked about with Rebel Without Cause, where it feels like it's adults writing for kids.
Yes. Yeah.
And this is the example of that.
Yeah.
Where it feels like, of course she would go to the mental hospital if her guy broke up with her. Yeah. It's very much like what a specifically a older male perspective thinks would happen.
I know I said last week that like when you're a teenager everything feels like heightened, but this was like a little too heightened for me.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah, and I just think kind of the way I need to rewatch this movie and like dig into it a little bit deeper, but it's at this point where it's kind of going like, oh, look how wrong these guys are for treating women like sex objects. But then it's also like not fully going that far. And the movie in itself, from a voyeuristic point of view, is the camera sometimes feels like it's treating them as sex objects. So I'm not sure like where I'm supposed to stand on it from like the way that it's acting and the way that it's shot sometimes. I'm not sure where the movie stands. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to feel about it.
Here's the question I have is, do you think, because I feel like, so Bud has some problematic moments. Like there's the moment when he like tells Deanie like get on her knees and like beg him, which is very just like, oh, this is very, A, it's dark, B, it feels so, it's different for the time period. It doesn't feel like a 1961 moment where literally a guy says, get on your knees and tell me you love me, and like pushes her down. It's very like, but then the question that you have is, and I don't know what Kazan was trying to say in these moments, was it that Beatty's character was being told what a man should be?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's where
that's
where I'm really confused with this, because there's definitely like I was talking about with Last Picture Show, you've got these scenes that's showing you that like the old generation and the adults are leading these people astray, and if everyone was just a little bit more open with each other, things would be better. But then there's other times where like you're feeling, where you watch it and you're like, I understand that the movie is showing us this lesson, but I like, especially with Bud, like sometimes I just don't know where Bud stands. Yeah. And we're supposed to feel like, oh, he loves her, but his dad won't let them be together, and his dad is telling him to go sow his wild oats, as they say. But then there's other times where you're like, no, he seems like he wants to be doing this like completely, and he doesn't really care about Deanie that much. So yeah, I'm not sure. I'm just unclear at like exactly what this movie is saying, I think. And I've got a good idea of it, but I guess I'm more unclear of like how it's saying it, because I think in the end it's definitely saying, you know, Deanie came out the most well-adjusted by in the end learning to be herself and follow her own heart. But did she have to do, like, is the movie saying that she needed to go completely insane and do 2 years in a mental institution to find that? I don't. I'm not sure. And then the other thing, if we're talking things that did not work, what I teased earlier and what I texted you about is the scene in the suicide is there. You know, there's a thing within filmmaking which is called day for night. You shoot outside, preferably when it's cloudy out, and then you tint everything blue. And the idea is that it makes it look like nighttime, but it was a extremely sunny day when they shot day for night for that scene. And if they had not been cutting back to, because they keep cutting back during that action to Bud going to Deanie's house to like check on her, and it's like night.
It's night.
And then they keep cutting back, and you're like, the sun is very obviously shining, and there's shots of them jumping into the water, and like the blue sky is reflected in the water. And I just texted you. I was like, this might be the worst day for night I've ever seen in my life. But day for night is no one ever really pulled off day for night well. It's one of those things that like everyone accepted within filmmaking for a very long time.
I'd say at that point, I think today a little bit different, but at that point it was, I would like to go. Yeah, that might be a Medium article. We're 10 good day for night scenes.
But yeah, that was not one of them for sure. Like I would have, if they hadn't have been cutting back to Bud going to check on her, I would have thought, oh, they've stayed out all night and it's like early 6 a.m. now. Yeah, I would have, and I probably would have just bought that. But then they keep cutting back to like in the town, and it is pitch black, like very obviously shot at night. And I mean, I appreciate, we talked about him not being safe on set. I appreciate they didn't shoot this like stunt heavy swimming scene in pitch black night, but it looks a little rough.
It was shot by Boris Kaufman though, who also shot 12 Angry Men, and I think shot on the waterfront, which he won an Oscar for.
I mean, I honestly think it would have been better if it was cloudy, which is ideal to shoot day for night on a cloudy day. But I'm not. I think something probably happened with their scheduling or what. I'm sure they knew that they needed it to be cloudy, and for some reason they just had to shoot on a beautiful sunny day.
So alternate universe cast. For one, Kazan always wanted Wood. Wood was in like his top 3 choices. At one point, though, he thought that maybe he should not cast her because she was a has-been child actor. That was the quote that was used.
Yeah, I mean, that, like, will people buy her as a like sexual teenager? That's that's always tough when people are making. I mean, I feel like every child actor has had to try and make that jump, and some do and some don't.
And she, at this point, what was said about the movie is that Natalie Wood wore a lot of heavy makeup in the 50s and the mid 50s to late 50s. And what Kazan did was basically say, like, hey, stop putting that much makeup on. Let's like put it down to like a small amount. And the makeup artist they used, I think, ended up being like Wood's makeup artist for the rest of her career, because that became like the look that Natalie Wood would have for the rest of the 60s. So in Elia Kazan's original notes, he listed Natalie Wood, Lee Remick, and Jane Fonda for the role of Deanie. And Fonda apparently had an audition or screen test of some kind for the role. She said that when he asked her if she was ambitious, she said no, because she thought that's what Deanie would say, and she feared that that's why she didn't get the part, or felt that's why she didn't get the part. For Bud Stamper, apparently Dennis Hopper was considered for the role.
That makes sense. That was a good time for him.
Yeah, coming off. I mean, it's a few years after Rebel Without Cause, a few years after Giant. It makes sense. Mm-hmm. Interesting facts about the movie that I haven't talked about. The first Hollywood film to show a French kiss.
Duh.
Between Bud and Juanita, who's like the flapper character, when they're making out under the waterfall. Pat Hingle was only 13 years older than Warren Beatty, and he played his father. Also, too, right before shooting was set to begin, Pat Hingle suffered devastating injuries when he accidentally fell 54 feet down an elevator shaft in his apartment building. It would take Hingle over a year to fully recover from the accident. In the meantime, he decided to go ahead and do the film and just added the limp as a part of the character, because he's limping throughout the movie, and says that, like, oh, like, I could have played football, or I had to stop playing football because I fell and broke my leg. And Hingle said, I broke everything. I landed upright, so I broke hips and knees, ankles, and ribs. That lurching walk that A. Stamper has, that was as good as I could walk at that point. Wow. It was Warren Beatty's screen debut. It was Sandy Dennis's screen debut. Also, Phyllis Diller, her screen debut as the nightclub like MC in New York, when she jokes that it was hard getting here because all the men falling from the skies. Yeah.
Oh yeah. You know what? Shout out that scene. I like that scene.
It's a good scene
because it's that energy of, and I think we can all relate to that, the energy in that scene, you know, given things happening currently, but all these people, like, who are very obviously about to be just absolutely crushed by the depression, like hanging out at a nightclub, having a good time, laughing about it, like not yet grasping what the extent of it is yet.
They're all rich people who are just like, oh yeah, it's not going to hurt us. And Hingle is like in a moment where, like, he realizes it's over for him, I think, at that moment in time, where he's like, that's when his voice gets really raspy, like, you want that girl? Let's go get that. Like, he's like trying to, like, essentially, like, he tries to pimp out, like, he tries to hire one of the nightclub dancers to have sex with the son. As, like, weirdly, it's like he thinks maybe his final gift to his son. He said, oh, she looks like Deanie, and basically says, oh, like, every girl's kind of the same. Like, it's a very, like, again, it's Beatty is saying that his father is, like, not the perfect person to be looking at for advice in terms of women and how he views women. Story questions. Well, one I had, would a psychiatrist actually tell Deanie, hey, you know, it'd be good, go see that guy who, like, put you here.
Yeah,
and that would make everything better.
That, like, destroyed you? Go check on him.
Yeah, you know, go check on him, because maybe that'll bring you closure. I'm not so sure. The analyst type stuff in this movie, it's definitely not how we feel about like psychiatrist and therapist. And then the last question I have: do you think they see each other again after the final scene?
I don't think so. I think their like questions have been answered.
Yeah.
I think they're kind of done with each other.
Do you think one of them wants to see the other person again?
I mean, I think Bud is definitely like realizing he made a mistake, but I also get kind of the feeling in the end that he's happy.
Yeah.
I do get kind of the feeling that they're both like, okay, life has not gone the way we expected it to, but I think they both recognize that they're, it's obviously been really tough for him. He lost his father, he lost his fortune, but like he's got a family. He's got this girl that I think that's why I like the pizza scene, is it does seem like they've got some sort of connection. And, it would be someone who his father would also disapprove of, but without his father around can pursue on his own. Yeah. And it is kind of hinted at that he got her pregnant, right? And just kind of, or is and married her because of that. But I think it's closing the book. I think that last scene is you and I have both gotten closure on this. Let's get on with our lives.
Well, and it comes back to, it ends with the splendor in the grass line. So it's this idea that they're going to let these memories live on like in their minds, but never go back to it. And I bring this back in to Natalie Wood's previous relationship with the young kid when she was 15, because they apparently said she never talked about that relationship ever again to anyone outside of like her close-knit group. So when she like did interviews, she never said she had a boyfriend in high school. And even the guy who she dated never told his like wife and kids of like in 45 years. Like it never came out that he dated Natalie Wood because apparently they were that close and they loved each other that much. They did not want to ruin it or bring anyone else into that memory of somehow. And so it's interesting. And so it kind of and Kazan actually said when they were doing the ending scene is that he could tell Natalie Wood never told him about that relationship, but he could tell like she had experienced something because he didn't give her any direction in that scene. That's all her. So there you go. Awards. The Beatrice Straight Award, actor and actress with limited scenes that kills it.
I think the sister. I think Kazan's wife. Yeah,
Barbara Loden. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
she definitely. And I mean, story wise, it helps that story wise she is this catalyst for like a lot of the change, but her performance as well is something that lingers over the movie after she's gone.
And what's interesting with her, and this kind of comes into play, I tie it back to American Graffiti, is that she is a character of a dying time, which is why you find out at the end that she died like in a car wreck. I think she died in a car wreck or something.
Yeah, they say a car wreck.
Yeah, so it's that she is just like this live fast, die young type character. And when as the time is changing, I said this, I think I might have said it in the previous episode or I cut it. Some of these movies in coming of age deal with a changing in time in terms of the time period or like the beginnings of the changing of norms. And so certain characters just don't exist in this new time period. And so like a flapper of the 20s that lives fast and drinks and does this. And maybe this is probably one problematic view in this movie is it basically says a character like Jeannie cannot exist outside of the previous era of the 20s. Like, she is a person who becomes affected deeply by the Great Depression and possibly gets addicted to something, if it's alcohol or whatever, and just dwindles into madness. And basically what it's kind of saying is that if Deanie, Natalie Wood's character, if she would have continued that path she started when she cut her hair and started dressing sexy, she would have gone the same way. Yeah, but I would say Barbara Loden as Jeannie as well. The Joe Pesci X Factor Award for supporting actor, actress who steals their scenes they're in.
I think maybe the father.
Yeah, I think Pat Hingle.
Yeah.
I think that's just he he has the flashier role than, say, Deanie's mother.
Mm-hmm.
I think Deanie's mother's pretty the same throughout the movie, and Hengel kind of has the, you're seeing this dude like be this rich man and then go rich man to essentially like broke because of the stock market crash, where he's invested all of his money in the stock market and oil, and when everything happens, it goes to shit basically. And when we showed it at our screening, the big thing that people did not expect was that him to kill himself.
Yeah, I think that it's played really well. Like I said, I wanted to shout that scene out again. He's such a over the top person in the beginning, especially when you're first introduced to him. He's like partying with his buddies, and he's so over the top and kind of lewd and loud that you don't realize at face value that scene in the club that he's even more so than he's even more manic than usual, and you don't realize it until in hindsight you're like, oh, he's broke, he's done, and he just wants to take his son out for like one more night on the town, which like what he thinks is a good time and what Bud does not agree with. But you're watching him being drunk and stumbling over the club and yelling at everyone, and you're like, oh yeah, that's just the way he's been the rest of the movie. And once he does commit suicide, you have this kind of flashback that you're like, oh yeah, that was more so he was more over the top than usual. Like he was definitely lost at that point. I think he plays that scene really well,
because he says to Beatty, like, when I'm gone, and he goes, well, I'm not kicking off for a very long time. It's very foreshadowing that the next scene is that he's jumped out of the building.
Mm-hmm.
It's played well. I think you have a shot of him looking out the window, and then it's the next morning as that Bud's waking up, and like they never say like, oh, your father killed himself.
Right.
It goes, are you Bud Stamper? And then it cuts to outside, and it's the bodies on the ground covered up. Pat Hingle, also Commissioner Gordon in the Batman.
Yep.
The first 4 Batman movies. The Gene Hackman MVP award to the person that wins the movie, or a person that carries the movie along.
I mean, it's got to be Natalie Wood.
Okay. Why?
I think definitely, like I said, I think there's some issues in this movie where she and Kazan don't line up in like her performance style and his directing style. But I think by the end of the movie, she's become like the Rock in the movie, and it's so.
I agree.
It makes you feel the movie in itself is so kind of manic that it feels good to see her stable. I think, and she plays it incredibly well. It feels good to see her stable and to see her happy too.
Yeah.
But she plays it so well. She's so at peace at the end. It really closes the movie out in a great way.
And I think she does a really good job of transitioning from this like love-struck high school girl, and like the scenes when they're like walking in the halls and like they're holding hands and walking to class.
Mm-hmm.
And then you compare that to the ending where she's this more mature, refined woman who's grown up. It's a big shift. And you don't realize until maybe the end of how big of a journey, good or bad, ups and downs, that Deanie has gone through. Natalie Wood's been able to carry that throughout. And even if it can be melodramatic in moments. I do think the second half of the movie is the better half of the movie. I think I think it's when the bathtub scene happens onward, or maybe the New Year's Eve sequence onward is when everything is kind of starts to click. It's very slow early on. I think that stuff doesn't work as well, and the second half of the movie is what really works the most. Because you have the ending scene. Like I said, most of my favorite scenes are in that second half of the film. Final questions. We'll see how this goes. If this film was remade today, who do you cast?
That one's tough, man, because I don't know teenagers these days.
Early 20s. Everyone in this movie is early 20s. So
yeah. Oh, I don't know what, like the cast of Riverdale, like who's who's this age?
Oh, what's Lily Reinhart is the who plays in Riverdale? Actually, I'm thinking now. I haven't seen Riverdale since the first season, so was it Camila Mendez?
Yeah, she's Veronica.
Yeah, Veronica Camila Mendez.
Yeah, man, this is the only age group I can't really pick because the only like teenage actors I know are like not good. Like I know them because they're not good.
That's so mean.
I mean that's the whole point of Riverdale, right? I mean that's kind of, it's like pulpy. I don't know. Maybe that works for this. Who knows?
I mean, is Florence Pugh too like easy to say? Is that just the one we're gonna put for every teenage character?
Yeah, I don't know who else is. What's the Kiernan Shipka?
Okay.
I know I'm just throwing names out. I haven't watched any of Sabrina. I mean, she was good. She was great in Mad Men, and she kind of brought some of that like energy of like I don't know what I want out of life.
I'll buy that. She was also in Feud, which I liked. She plays Betty Davis's daughter in that show.
All right. Well,
Okay.
I'm still letting her coast off of Mad Men energy, but she was awesome in that. So there you go.
She's 20. Okay, I'll buy that.
Boom.
We'll go with that.
Nailed it
for her. You got a bud?
What time period are we setting this in, by the way?
That's a good question.
We're setting it in the 20s. It's made modern day, but set in the 20s.
Yeah, let's go with the 20s still. I think we should keep it in the 20s.
Okay, 20-year-old male actor who's been good lately. I mean, I still love and you know what? He's kind of disappeared like in the last like couple of years. I mean, he's young, so you know he'll be fine. But I also haven't seen Honey Boy yet, so I can't speak to that. But Lucas Hedges.
Oh, Lucas Hedges.
Love Lucas Hedges.
Okay. I'm not against this.
How old is Lucas Hedges right now? Lucas Hedges, how old are you?
Yeah, send us a voicemail. Tell us how old you are.
23.
Lucas Hedges. Yeah, he's 23. She's 20. I'll go with that. If they started shooting today, which is going to be impossible in the year of COVID. Okay, who do you put for his father?
Okay, there we go. Now we're getting into it.
Now we're cooking.
He used to be a footballer. Now he's an oil baron.
Kyle Chandler.
Woody Harrelson.
That makes sense. I'd put him. Yeah, I could see that. Do you have a sister? Do you have Jeannie?
Jeannie. Okay. All right. Kind of
mid-20s,
late 20s.
Late 20s. Yeah, mid-late 20s.
Huh. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have anybody on that one off the top of my head. I'm trying to think of who would like be their kid.
Yeah. Who would be
Woody
Harrelson's kid
and Lucas Hedges' sister? Yeah, I don't know. That one's tough. Trying to think. Maybe Florence Pugh. You know what? Yeah, give me Florence Pugh in that.
Let's go Florence Pugh for that one. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, I think that's fine. I think we're good there. Does this film fit with any other genre besides coming of age?
I mean, I think it's definitely a melodrama.
Would you consider melodrama a genre?
No, I don't. And I hate that I keep using that word because I really dislike when that's used to like downplay a movie. It definitely feels like something outside of coming of age because it's not something I would point to immediately and be like, oh, coming of age movie. I mean, it is about teenagers and about growing up, but it doesn't always feel like if somebody said, hey, what's a good coming of age movie? This would not be, and not that I don't think it's good, but this would just not be what I think. If someone said to you, I want to watch a coming of age movie, I don't think this would be what they had in mind.
No, I agree with you on that.
It fits into the things, clashing with your parents, the oppressiveness of a small town. It fits in with all of that, but it's not most coming of age movies, like most of the ones we talked about last week, are not this dark for sure.
Yeah. Again, I really don't think that changes until Last Picture Show.
Yeah.
Even though that does have darkness to it. I think you're still in this era of adults writing how they think kids are.
Yeah, and I think we eventually, something that we haven't really talked about, but we did talk about it a little bit with American Graffiti, but something you'll get eventually is that when I think of coming of age, I do think that there is a celebration of being that age involved.
Yeah.
And I don't think this movie has that. This movie does not make it seem pleasant to be a teenager in that time period. And in every movie, even, as pitch black dark as Last Picture Show is, there are moments of like, this will be the best years of these people's lives.
Yeah.
And you get that. You get the pain that they're going through and the confusion they're going through, but you also see like that pure teenage joy. And I don't know that this movie really like brings that. And that, I think that is, and Rebel Without a Cause definitely doesn't bring that. It's all about the angst and the anguish of being that age without any of the like positive parts of it, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know what else I would just say, like straight up drama. I think this is a
sex drama.
Yeah. I think this, and maybe a period piece. But I do think this devotes itself more to being just a drama for everyone than the later coming of age movies being like, hey, teenagers out there, this movie is for you. Like we'll find when we go on to John Hughes.
I think you kind of covered it here, but we'll just reinstate some things again. How does this film fit into the coming of age genre? You said kind of being stuck in your hometown or oppressed in your hometown, conflict with parents, sexual repression, sexual awakening.
I mean, virginity
well.
Is definitely virginity is something that's going to factor into coming of age movies like all over. We didn't talk about it as much last week, but like that is time, no matter the time or the place or anything, that's factors into almost all of these coming of age movies that we're talking about.
I would agree. So, do you have a final verdict on Splendor in the Grass?
I don't know, man. I gotta sit with it. I really gotta sit with it. I'm glad I watched it. It's extremely interesting, and like I said, and Beatty especially, it's wild to see this be his like screen debut,
first movie,
and Wood as a transition from like teen actress, especially in the same, to drop the same year as West Side Story, is amazing. So yeah, like I said, I think the cast really shines in this. Like I said with Kazan, I'm kind of hit and miss with Kazan. I love On the Waterfront. Streetcar is like a little too much for me sometimes. The energy in Streetcar is like, the Hey Stella and all of it. And I love Tennessee Williams. But I kind of prefer some of the more understated takes on his work than that one. So yeah, I'm still not sure where I sit on it is a good movie from all technical standpoints. It is a quality film. I'm just not sure how I feel about I'm not sure what the movie is saying. I'm not sure what I take away from the movie necessarily, and I need to keep sitting on that.
Okay. Yeah, it would be real quick. It would begin kind of the beginning of Natalie Wood's like renaissance in a way. She would do this movie, West Side Story, the same year. She did a movie called Gypsy, which was an adaptation of the Broadway musical. She did Love with the Proper Stranger, which she was nominated for her third and final Oscar, about a young woman who is trying to get an abortion in a time when abortions are not legal. But yeah, she ends up being like named like one of the most popular stars of the 1960s, and has this huge run of movies and award nominations, and then just kind of stops acting around 1969 with Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice, and then doesn't do much after that. But like for a brief like 8-year period, she's one of the hottest actresses, one of the hottest movie stars in Hollywood. So that's the end of our Splendor in the Grass episode. Hopefully you've checked it out before listening to it. If you haven't, go check it out on HBO Max, around on Amazon. For the rest of the month, we're going to have, we're doing next week, the plan is to do Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and then we're doing Lady Bird, and then our final episode for the month is on John Hughes. Make sure you stay tuned for that. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and Stitcher. Give us a rating, give us a review. That would be very helpful. We want to hear what you guys think, especially with this kind of new type of show we're doing with these month series. You can find us on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and make sure you're looking at what we're doing on Medium with our writings. I think that's it. Thomas, as always, thank you so much for coming on
For sure, dude.
and discussing a movie you're
Yeah,
confused about.
I'm still picking through it. Thanks everyone for listening to me digest my thoughts on this.
Yeah. Guys, thank you so much for listening. We hope you listen to more episodes soon. Bye.